I saw something in the water that night. I live near a large body of water. From my apartment, I can see the waves constantly crashing against the rocks below. It's a beautiful place. But this story isn't meant to discuss beauty, unfortunately. It's to discuss something I saw in the water one night. Something that haunts me. Something terrifying. I couldn't sleep. I have insomnia and I find it very hard to go to bed. I've been prescribed medication for that and a number of other issues, but none of it helps. When I get like that, sometimes the best thing for me to do is to stand outside and watch the waves crash against the rocks. It's calming, in a way, and the dim light illuminates the waves just enough. I do this frequently. While I was out there, in the darkness, I saw the figure of a woman. She was standing on one of the rocks, looking up at me, in a light-colored dress. The waves would come up and over the rock, but she was unfazed. She barely even moved. She just stood there looking at me, her dress the only thing being affected by the elements. I stared back at her, mesmerized. There was something about her that seemed so familiar, but she was too far away. The next thing I knew, I opened my eyes and I was in my own bed. It wasn't odd for me to lose time like that. Actually, it happened quite frequently. The doctors prescribed me medication so I don't black out and forget, but to be honest, I don't really like the way it makes me feel, so I take it very sparingly. My friends and family all tell me I should just listen to my doctor and take whatever he's prescribed to me. They also tell me I shouldn't live so close to the water. What if I had a blackout and walked into the water and drowned, they say. I tell them not to worry. That kind of thing has never happened and most likely never will. That is a little bit of a lie, though. There was one time I blacked out and woke up alone, near the water, by the rocks. That was a horrible night. I took my prescribed medicine for a long time after that. That was the loneliest night of my life. Anyway, I digress. The woman I saw, standing by the water, on the rocks. That's what this whole thing is about. The next night I went closer to the water, curious if she would appear again. And she did. In the midst of a terrible thunderstorm. But once again, I was just a little too far to see who it was. But in my heart, I think I knew. She raised a pale hand toward me, palm upward, almost trying to draw me in. A flash of lightning lit up the night sky and illuminated her face just for a moment. Once again, I woke up in my own bed. I had blacked out. But at the very least, I now knew who this woman was. I think I always knew. When the lightning flashed, I saw the face of my beautiful wife, who died in the water a year ago now, in a terrible accident. Apparently, she slipped on some rocks and fell into the water, drowning. I don't remember much about that night. It was the loneliest night of my life. I started taking my prescribed medicine much more regularly after that. She would always tell me to take the medication prescribed to mitigate the blackouts. My wife would. But I just never liked how they made me feel during my waking hours, so I would pretend to take them. and for the most part I can keep my blackouts under control. Every once in a while, though, I'll still lose a chunk of time. Like that night. But it's rare. Was I hallucinating now? Was that what this was? Seeing my wife as an apparition on a rock. I had to be sure. I had to make it to her tonight. I couldn't risk having another blackout, so despite my displeasure, I took my pills. I had to talk to her. Maybe she could tell me what happened that night. The night she drowned. Darkness finally came, and I stood outside looking out onto the water as I had done the past 2 nights. Appearing almost with the wind, I saw her emerge. She stood out on the same rock, her hands reaching out to me. I walked down closer and closer to my beautiful wife, praying that I wouldn't have another blackout. 20 feet away. 15 feet away. 10 feet. I reached out and touched her hand. Her face was pale, but still the way I remember her. She gave me a smile and tilted her head in the direction of the water. I nodded yes, and we both jumped in together, narrowly missing the rocks in front of us. The water was dark and cold. She gently tugged at my arm to go under the water with her. I ducked my head under and she pulled me beneath the waves. She somehow was able to move like a fish without using any of her limbs. Her grip on my arm tightened and she looked back at me. I was beginning to run out of breath. I struggled against her grip, but it was like a vice. I kicked and struggled, but it was no use. She was pulling me further and further down. My air was almost gone. And then I remembered. I remembered that night. The night my wife drowned. The loneliest night of my life. I never liked taking my medicine. I didn't like how it made me feel. My wife would always tell me to take it to mitigate the blackouts, but I would just pretend to take it. I saw myself, but also not myself. My blackout self, walking out the back door towards the rocks, towards the water. My wife, who had noticed I was gone, was sprinting after me in her white nightgown. I was close to the rocks now, so close to falling or jumping into the water. I'm not sure what my blackout self's plan was. She grabbed me to try to stop me from falling over the edge. My blackout self struggled against her grip, and all it took was a second for her to slip and be gone forever. I woke up the following morning near the rocks, alone. The loneliest night of my life. She was still dragging me further and further into the dark water when I finally opened my eyes. I must have been so deep now. The water had an unearthly glow to it, like someone was shining a light, only the light was everywhere. I was alone. My wife was gone and I was floating in the vast emptiness of a glowing sea. And then I awoke in my own bed. Surely that, despite how vivid it seemed, was a dream. Or a nightmare. The memory of the night of my wife's death played over and over again in my head as I attempted to lift myself from the bed. I went into the bathroom to wash my face. As I felt the cool water on my skin, all of a sudden I gasped, my lungs filling up with water seemingly by the gallon. I thrashed around. It was dark. I was suddenly in the water. Far away in the distance, I could see the lights of my apartment building as I flailed against the waves. As the tide pulled me under, I could have sworn I saw the faint silhouette of a woman in a white nightgown standing among the waves.